Pure nonsense. This will implode the moment it touches real-world operations. Director Gerald's voice boomed across the conference room, his laughter echoing off the glass walls. He waved my presentation slides like they were contaminated. Did anyone actually review this before wasting the board's time? I stood at the front of that boardroom in Salt Lake City, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. The entire executive team sat there, some looking uncomfortable, others smirking along with Gerald. My efficiency optimization project, the thing I had poured 8 months of my life into, was being torn apart like garbage. My name is Katie, and I was 29 years old when everything I had worked for came crashing down in that meeting. I had been a senior operations analyst at North Peak Engineering for 3 years, and I thought I had finally created something that could change how the company functioned. The project was simple in concept, but revolutionary in execution. A software system that could reduce operational costs by analyzing workflow inefficiencies in real time and automatically suggesting corrections. I had run the numbers dozens of times. The pilot test showed a 55% reduction in wasted resources. 55%. That was not a small improvement. That was transformational. I had documentation, case studies, projections. Everything pointed to this being exactly what North Peak needed. But Gerald, the director of operations and my direct superior, had never liked me. I knew that from day one. He was in his late 50s, one of those men who had climbed the corporate ladder when handshakes mattered more than actual competence. He saw me as a threat, someone who might expose how outdated his methods were. Katie here thinks she can revolutionize our entire operation with some app she cobbled together, Gerald continued, his tone dripping with condescension. Tell me, Katie, did you even consider the infrastructure costs, the training requirements, the inevitable system failures? I took a breath. I did consider all of that. The implementation costs are projected in the financial breakdown on page 12. The training is minimal because the interface is intuitive, and the system has fail-safes built in specifically to prevent fail-safes, he interrupted, laughing again. You hear that? She has fail-safes. Listen, sweetheart. I have been doing this job since before you graduated high school. I know what works and what does not. This is amateur hour. Sweetheart. He actually called me sweetheart in front of the board. I felt my face burn. Some of the board members shifted in their seats. The chief financial officer, Patricia, looked like she wanted to say something, but she stayed quiet. Everyone stayed quiet. Nobody wanted to challenge Gerald. He had been with the company for 23 years. He had relationships, influence, power. I looked around the room. The data supports this. If you would just look at the pilot results. The pilot results are meaningless, Gerald said flatly. You ran tests on a small team under controlled conditions. That proves nothing. In the real world, with actual pressure and actual stakes, this system would collapse. It is fundamentally flawed. How is it flawed? I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Gerald leaned back in his chair, smiling like he had won. Because it relies on theoretical efficiency models that do not account for human behavior. People are not robots, Katie. You cannot optimize them like they are lines of code. That is exactly why the system works, I said. It does not force people into rigid processes. It adapts to how people actually work and finds inefficiencies in the gaps. It is designed around human behavior, not in spite of it. Gerald waved his hand dismissively. This conversation is over. The project is dead. We are not implementing this, and frankly, I am disappointed that resources were wasted on it in the first place. The room went silent. I stood there, feeling like the floor was dropping out from under me. 8 months. 8 months of late nights, skipped weekends, sacrificed time with friends and family. All of it dismissed in 15 minutes. I gathered my papers slowly, deliberately. My hands were shaking, but I kept my face neutral. I would not give Gerald the satisfaction of seeing me break down. "I am done then," I said quietly. Gerald looked up, surprised. "What?" "I am done," I repeated, louder this time. "If this company does not see the value in innovation, then I do not see the value in staying." Gerald's expression shifted from surprise to amusement. "Are you threatening to quit?" "I am not threatening anything. I am telling you that I am leaving, but you will hear from me in 8 months. "Is that a threat?" Gerald asked, his smile widening. "No," I said. "It is a promise." I walked out of that boardroom with my head high, even though inside I felt like I was falling apart. I cleaned out my desk that same afternoon. My coworkers watched me pack up my things, and a few came over to offer quiet words of support. They knew what had happened. Word spread fast in offices like that. My friend Jenna, who worked in the finance department, found me in the parking lot as I was loading boxes into my car. "Katie, wait. Are you really leaving?" "I am," I said. "But what about your project? You worked so hard on it." "Gerald killed it. There is nothing left to fight for here." Jenna looked upset. "That is so unfair. Everyone knows your project was solid. He just hated that you made him look bad." "I know," I said, "but it does not matter now. So what are you going to do?" I looked at her, and something inside me hardened into resolve. I am going to prove him wrong. I grew up in a small town outside Salt Lake City, the daughter of 2 public school teachers who taught me that hard work and integrity mattered more than anything else. My parents were not wealthy, but they made sure my younger brother and I had everything we needed. They taught us to value education, to question assumptions, and to never settle for mediocrity. I was always good with numbers and patterns. In high school, I took every math and computer science class available. My teachers encouraged me to apply to top engineering programs, but my family could not afford the out-of-state tuition. I went to the state university instead, worked 2 part-time jobs to cover expenses, and graduated with honors in industrial engineering. North Peak Engineering hired me right out of college. It was a mid-sized firm that specialized in logistics and supply chain optimization for manufacturing companies. The work was challenging, and I loved it. I threw myself into every project, learned from the senior analysts, and quickly moved up from junior analyst to senior analyst. But I also noticed things: inefficiencies, outdated processes, systems that had not been updated in years because nobody wanted to rock the boat. I started documenting these issues, looking for patterns, and within a year, I had identified dozens of areas where the company was hemorrhaging money. That was when I came up with the idea for the efficiency optimization system. It was not just software. It was a complete rethinking of how operations were managed. Instead of relying on quarterly reviews and static reports, the system would monitor workflows in real time, flag problems as they emerged, and suggest solutions based on predictive analytics. I pitched the idea to Gerald during one of our team meetings. He listened with a skeptical expression, then told me it sounded interesting but would require more research. I took that as permission to move forward. For the next 8 months, I worked on the project during every spare moment. I coded the prototype myself, learning new programming languages and data analysis techniques along the way. I ran small-scale tests with a few willing coworkers, refining the system based on their feedback. The results were undeniable. The system worked. I thought Gerald would be thrilled. I thought he would see this as a win for the entire department, something that would make us look good to the executive team. I was naive. Gerald saw it as a threat. If my system worked, it would expose how inefficient his management had been. It would show that there were better ways to do things, ways he had never considered. He could not let that happen. Looking back, I should have seen the warning signs. The way he dismissed my progress updates. The way he excluded me from key meetings. The way he subtly undermined my credibility with other team members. But I was too focused on the work to notice the politics. The day after I quit, I sat in my apartment and stared at my laptop. I had no job, no backup plan, and no idea what to do next. My savings could cover maybe 3 months of expenses if I was careful. After that, I would be in serious trouble. But I also had something Gerald did not expect. I had my project. The code, the data, the documentation, all of it was mine. I had worked on it outside of company time, using my own equipment and resources. North Peak had no legal claim to it. I opened my laptop and started researching. How do you start a company? How do you secure funding? How do you turn an idea into a real business? The learning curve was steep. I spent the next week buried in articles, videos, and podcasts about entrepreneurship. I joined online forums where startup founders shared advice. I reached out to former classmates who had gone into tech. I absorbed everything I could. One name kept coming up in my research. Vivian, a venture capitalist based in Salt Lake City, who specialized in early-stage tech startups. She had a reputation for taking risks on unconventional ideas. I found her email address and drafted a message introducing myself and my project. I rewrote it 7 times before finally hitting send. To my surprise, Vivian responded within 2 days. She wanted to meet. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Vivian was in her early 40s, sharply dressed, with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. She listened as I explained the efficiency optimization system, asked pointed questions about the technology and market potential, and then leaned back in her chair. "This is interesting," she said. "But why did you leave your job to pursue it?" I told her the truth. About Gerald, about the boardroom humiliation, about walking out with nothing but my pride. Vivian smiled. "Good. You have something to prove. That is the best motivation there is." She introduced me to 2 other investors, both of whom were intrigued by the project. Within 3 weeks, I had secured enough angel investment to register my own startup, rent a small office space, and hire 2 junior developers to help me scale the prototype. I named the company Streamline Solutions. Simple, direct, and exactly what we were offering. Those first few months were brutal. I worked 16-hour days, learning how to manage a team, handle investor expectations, and navigate legal requirements. I made mistakes. I miscalculated timelines. I burned through cash faster than I expected. But the system kept improving. Every iteration made it faster, smarter, more intuitive. The developers I hired were brilliant, and they believed in what we were building. We were not just creating software. We were creating something that could genuinely help companies work better. By month 4, we had a functional beta version ready for testing. I reached out to small businesses that might benefit from the system, offering free trials in exchange for feedback. The response was overwhelming. Within weeks, we had a waiting list of companies wanting to try it. The efficiency metrics embarrassed industry standards. One logistics company reduced their operational waste by 48% in the first month. A manufacturing firm cut costs by 52%. The numbers kept climbing. I knew we had something special. But I also knew that to really make an impact, we needed to scale bigger. 5 months after leaving North Peak, I was standing in a conference room across town, pitching Streamline Solutions to executives from Velthorn Industries, one of the largest tech conglomerates in the region. They had heard about our beta results and wanted to see the system in action. I walked them through a live demonstration, showing how the software analyzed workflow data in real time and identified inefficiencies within seconds. I showed them case studies from our beta clients. I answered every technical question they threw at me. The head of acquisitions, a man named Douglas, sat at the far end of the table, watching me closely. When I finished, he glanced at his team, then back at me. "This is impressive work," Douglas said. "How big is your team?" 3 full-time developers, 1 part-time marketing consultant, and me, I said. Douglas raised an eyebrow. "You built this with 4 people?" "We did." He leaned back in his chair. "We have been looking for exactly this kind of solution for our internal operations, but we have also been considering developing something in-house. Why should we work with you instead?" I did not hesitate. Because we have already solved the problems you would spend 2 years and millions of dollars trying to figure out. Our system is proven, scalable, and ready to deploy. You could start seeing results within weeks, not years. Douglas smiled slightly. Confident. Realistic, I corrected. The meeting ended with Douglas telling me they would be in touch. I left feeling cautiously optimistic but tried not to get my hopes up. Big companies moved slowly. It could take months before I heard anything. But 3 days later, Douglas called me directly. Velthorn wanted to move forward. Not just as a client. They wanted to acquire Streamline Solutions outright. The offer was staggering. More money than I had ever imagined seeing in my entire life. Enough to pay back my investors 10 times over, take care of my parents, and still have more than enough left to start something new if I wanted to. I sat in my tiny office staring at the acquisition offer and thought about Gerald. I thought about how he had laughed at me, dismissed my work, called it nonsense. I thought about the board members who had sat silently while he humiliated me. And then I thought about something better than just proving him wrong. I wanted him to know. I wanted everyone at North Peak to know. I called Jenna, my friend who still worked there. "Can you do me a favor?" I asked. "Of course. What do you need?" "I need you to tell me when the next board meeting is." Jenna hesitated. "Why?" "Just trust me." 2 weeks later, on the day Velthorn officially announced the acquisition, I sent a thank you card to Gerald at North Peak. The card was simple, elegant, with a handwritten note inside. "Dear Gerald, thank you for teaching me that sometimes the best opportunities come from knowing when to walk away. I hope you have been following the news. Not so nonsense now, huh? Best regards, Katie." I included a printed copy of the press release announcing Velthorn's acquisition of Streamline Solutions for $120 million. Jenna called me 2 days later, laughing so hard she could barely speak. "Katie, oh my God. Everyone is talking about your card. Someone took a picture of it and it is spreading all over the company." Gerald's face when he opened it. I wish you could have seen it. What did he do? He turned completely red and locked himself in his office for an hour. Then he came out and tried to pretend like nothing happened, but everyone knows. Patricia from the board actually came down to his floor to ask him about it. Apparently, she remembered your presentation and wondered why he had been so quick to shut it down. I felt a rush of satisfaction that was better than any revenge fantasy I had imagined. It was not just that I had succeeded. It was that Gerald's entire department now knew he had dismissed a project that ended up being worth $120 million. The story did not stay contained to North Peak. Within days, someone had posted about it on an industry forum. Then, it made its way to Twitter. People started sharing it, adding their own commentary about short-sighted management and toxic workplace cultures. My thank you card became a symbol of poetic justice. Journalists reached out asking for interviews. Business podcasts wanted me to tell the story. I declined most of them, but I did agree to one interview with a local tech publication. The headline read, "Local Engineer Turns Rejection into $120 million Success." In the article, I talked about the importance of believing in your work, even when others do not. I talked about the risks of starting a company and the support I had received from investors who took a chance on me. And when the interviewer asked about North Peak, I kept it professional but honest. There are companies that encourage innovation, and there are companies that fear it, I said. I am grateful to have found people who believed in what I was building. The article went viral in tech circles. North Peak's name was mentioned repeatedly, not in a flattering light. People started asking questions about their internal culture and management practices. I heard through Jenna that Gerald was under serious scrutiny from the board. They wanted to know why he had dismissed a project that could have saved the company tens of millions of dollars. They wanted to know if there were other innovations being stifled by outdated management. But I was not thinking about Gerald anymore. I was busy with the acquisition process, working with Velthorn's team to integrate Streamline Solutions into their operations. The transition was complex, but it was also exhilarating. I was learning more in those weeks than I had in years. One afternoon, I received an email from Patricia, the chief financial officer who had been in that disastrous board meeting. She congratulated me on my success and asked if I would be willing to meet for coffee. I agreed, curious about what she wanted. We met at the same coffee shop where I had first met Vivian. Patricia looked uncomfortable as she sat down across from me. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I should have spoken up in that meeting. Your project deserved a fair evaluation, and Gerald shut it down unfairly. I knew it at the time, but I did not say anything." I appreciated her honesty. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because what happened to you has made me realize how much we have lost by not challenging people like Gerald. You are not the first talented person he has driven away. You are just the first one whose success was impossible to ignore." We talked for over an hour. Patricia told me that North Peak was undergoing major changes, restructuring management and implementing new policies to encourage innovation. It was too little, too late for me, but maybe it would help the next person. As I left that meeting, I felt a sense of closure I had not expected. The revenge I had wanted was not really about hurting Gerald. It was about proving to myself that I had been right to believe in my work, that walking away had been the right choice, and that success was possible even when people tried to tear you down. The acquisition process with Velthorn moved faster than I expected. Within 6 weeks, the deal was finalized, the money was in the bank, and Streamline Solutions officially became part of their technology division. I stayed on as a consultant for the integration, which meant I spent most of my time in meetings with their engineering teams, explaining the system architecture and training their developers on maintenance protocols. It was strange going from running my own small startup to being part of a massive corporation. Velthorn had thousands of employees, multiple office buildings, and layers of bureaucracy that made even simple decisions take weeks. But they also had resources I could never have accessed on my own: massive computing power, talented engineers, and distribution channels that could get the efficiency system into companies worldwide. Douglas, the head of acquisitions, became something of a mentor during those weeks. He invited me to strategy meetings where Velthorn executives discussed their long-term vision for operational technology. They saw my system as just the beginning, a foundation they could build on to create an entire suite of efficiency tools. During one of these meetings, Douglas asked me what I wanted to do next. "You could stay on permanently," he said. "Lead the development of the next generation of this technology. We would give you a team, a budget, and complete creative control." It was tempting. The security of a steady paycheck, the prestige of working for a major tech company, the opportunity to keep building on what I had started. But something held me back. "Can I think about it?" I asked. "Of course. Take your time." I left that meeting feeling conflicted. Part of me wanted to accept immediately. Another part remembered why I had left North Peak in the first place. The frustration of working within systems that did not value innovation. The exhaustion of fighting political battles just to get things done. That evening, I met Vivian for dinner at a restaurant downtown. She wanted to celebrate the acquisition, but she also sensed my hesitation about what came next. "You seem distracted," she said after we ordered. "I am trying to figure out what to do with my life," I admitted. "Velthorn wants me to stay on permanently. It is a great opportunity, but I am not sure if it is what I want." Vivian set down her wine glass and looked at me seriously. "What do you want?" "I do not know anymore. A year ago, I just wanted to build something that worked. Now I have done that, and I feel like I should be happier about it." "You are not happy." "I am proud of what we accomplished," I said carefully. "But I think I missed the challenge of building from scratch. Working for Velthorn feels safe, and safe feels boring." Vivian smiled. "Then do not take the safe route. You have the money now to take risks. You could start something completely new. You could invest in other founders. You could take a year off and travel the world." You have earned the freedom to choose." Her words stayed with me for days. I had spent so long focused on proving Gerald wrong that I had not thought about what I actually wanted beyond that. Now that I had succeeded, the path forward felt less clear. Meanwhile, the story about my thank you card continued to spread. What had started as an inside joke at North Peak became a widely shared anecdote in business circles. Someone created a meme using a screenshot of a news article about the acquisition with the caption, "Not so nonsense now, huh?" It got thousands of shares. I started receiving messages from people I had never met. Other engineers who had been dismissed by short-sighted managers, entrepreneurs who had been told their ideas would never work, young professionals struggling to be taken seriously in toxic work environments. They thanked me for sharing my story. They told me it gave them courage to stand up for themselves. One message in particular stuck with me. It was from a woman named Claire who worked at a manufacturing company in Denver. She wrote that she had developed an inventory management system that could save her company millions, but her supervisor kept blocking her efforts to present it to upper management. She had been ready to give up until she read about my experience. "Your story reminded me that sometimes you have to leave to succeed," Claire wrote. "I just gave my notice today. I am terrified, but I am also excited. Thank you for showing me it was possible." I responded to Claire immediately, offering to connect her with Vivian and other investors who might be interested in her project. We exchanged several emails over the following weeks, and I found myself energized by helping her navigate the same challenges I had faced. That was when it hit me. What I wanted to do next was not work for Velthorn, and it was not start another company of my own. What I wanted was to help other people in situations like mine. People with great ideas who were being held back by bad management or lack of resources. I called Vivian and told her my plan. I wanted to use part of the acquisition money to create an angel investment fund specifically focused on projects that had been rejected by established companies. I wanted to find the next person like me, someone with a brilliant idea and no support system, and give them a chance. Vivian loved it. "That is perfect for you," she said. "You understand what it is like to be in that position. You would be an incredible resource for founders who are just starting out." We spent the next month setting up the fund. I brought in 2 other investors to diversify the expertise, and we established criteria for the types of projects we would support. Within weeks of announcing the fund, I was flooded with applications. But something else was happening that I had not anticipated. North Peak was unraveling. Jenna called me one evening, her voice tense. "Katie, things are getting really bad here. Gerald is completely losing it." "What do you mean?" "After your card went viral, the board started asking questions about why he dismissed your project. They brought in consultants to audit the department, and they found that Gerald has been blocking or sabotaging multiple innovation initiatives over the past 5 years. Projects that could have saved the company millions. Your situation was not unique. It was part of a pattern." I felt a chill. "He sabotaged other projects?" "At least 8 that they have documented so far. Some people quit. Others just gave up and stopped trying. Gerald saw innovation as a threat to his authority, so he systematically crushed anything that made him look bad." "That is insane." "It gets worse," Jenna said. "The board is furious. They are talking about firing him, but Gerald is fighting back. He is claiming that you stole company intellectual property when you left, and he is trying to get them to sue you." My stomach dropped. "What?" "He is saying that you developed the efficiency system on company time using company resources, so North Peak owns it. He wants them to file a lawsuit claiming you had no right to sell it to Velthorn." "That is completely false," I said, my voice shaking. "I documented everything. I worked on it outside office hours, used my own equipment, my own money for testing. North Peak has no claim to it." "I know that, and the board probably knows that too. But Gerald is desperate. He thinks if he can make you look like a thief, it will take the heat off him." I hung up the phone feeling sick. I had thought the worst was behind me. I had thought winning meant I could move forward without looking back. But Gerald was not done fighting. The next morning, I received a letter from North Peak's legal team. It was exactly what Jenna had warned me about. A formal notice claiming that my efficiency optimization system was developed using company resources and therefore constituted company intellectual property. They were demanding that I cease any further commercialization of the system and provide documentation proving otherwise. The letter was signed by North Peak's chief legal counsel, but I could practically hear Gerald's voice in every line. This was his last-ditch effort to destroy what I had built. I immediately called the lawyer I had worked with during the Velthorn acquisition, a sharp woman named Beverly, who specialized in intellectual property cases. I forwarded her the letter and waited anxiously for her response. Beverly called me back within 2 hours. "This is garbage," she said bluntly. "They have no case, but we need to take it seriously because even a frivolous lawsuit can cause problems." "What kind of problems?" "Velthorn might get nervous about the acquisition. Business partners might hesitate to work with you. And fighting a lawsuit is expensive and time-consuming even when you know you are going to win." "So what do I do?" "We respond aggressively. We show them that we have ironclad documentation proving you developed this system independently. And we make it clear that if they pursue this, we will countersue for harassment and damage to your reputation." Beverly was as good as her word. Within 3 days, she had compiled a comprehensive response package that included time-stamped files showing when I had worked on the project, receipts for equipment and software I had purchased, emails proving I had sought legal advice before leaving North Peak to ensure I was not violating any contracts, and testimony from my developers confirming that the current version of the system was substantially different from anything that had existed during my time at North Peak. But Beverly also did something I had not expected. She filed a formal complaint with the Utah State Bar, alleging that North Peak's legal team was pursuing a case they knew had no merit solely to harass a former employee. It was a bold move, but Beverly insisted it was necessary. "We need to show them we are not backing down," she explained. "Companies like North Peak count on people being too scared or too broke to fight back. You have resources now. Use them." The complaint sent shockwaves through North Peak. According to Jenna, the board was furious when they learned about it. They had not fully understood the weakness of Gerald's claims when they authorized the legal letter, and now they were facing potential sanctions from the state bar. Within a week, I received a call from Patricia, the chief financial officer. She asked if we could meet in person to discuss the situation. I brought Beverly with me. We met in a conference room at a neutral location, a business center halfway between Salt Lake City and North Peak's headquarters. Patricia arrived with North Peak's outside legal counsel, a gray-haired man named Howard who looked deeply uncomfortable. Patricia got straight to the point. "We want to resolve this situation quickly and quietly. After reviewing the documentation your attorney provided, it is clear that North Peak has no legitimate claim to your intellectual property. We are prepared to withdraw the demand letter and issue a formal statement confirming that you developed the efficiency system independently." "And what do you want in return?" Beverly asked. "We would like you to drop the bar complaint," Patricia said. "And we would like a mutual non-disparagement agreement. You do not talk negatively about North Peak, and we do not talk negatively about you." Beverly glanced at me, and I shook my head slightly. "No," I said. Patricia looked surprised. "No? I will drop the bar complaint, but I am not signing a non-disparagement agreement. I have never spoken negatively about North Peak beyond stating facts about what happened. I sent Gerald a thank you card that went viral, but I did not create the meme or orchestrate the public response. That happened organically because people connected with the story. You cannot ask me to pretend none of that happened or prevent me from talking about my own experiences." Howard, the lawyer, started to object, but Patricia held up a hand. "You are right," she said quietly. "That was an overreach on our part. We will withdraw the demand letter and issue the statement confirming your independent development of the system. In return, you drop the bar complaint. That is the deal." Beverly looked at me and I nodded. Agreed. We shook hands, and that should have been the end of it. But as we were leaving, Patricia asked if she could speak to me privately for a moment. Beverly stepped outside, and Patricia closed the conference room door. "There is something you should know," Patricia said. "The board voted yesterday to terminate Gerald's employment effective immediately. We are also conducting a full investigation into his conduct over the past decade. What we are finding is disturbing. Jenna mentioned he blocked other projects. It was more than that. He actively destroyed documentation, lied to the board about project viability, and in at least 3 cases, took credit for work done by junior employees. One of those employees was so demoralized, they left the industry entirely. We are trying to locate them now to make amends." I felt a mix of vindication and sadness. "I am glad you are addressing it, but those people deserve better while it was happening." "I know," Patricia said. "I failed them by not speaking up sooner. That is something I have to live with. But I wanted you to know that we are taking serious steps to change the culture at North Peak. We have implemented new policies, brought in outside consultants, and we are actively recruiting diverse talent to rebuild the operations department." "Why are you telling me this?" Patricia hesitated. "Because I wanted to ask if you would consider consulting for us. Not permanently, but perhaps helping us establish better processes for evaluating innovation proposals. You have insight into what went wrong, and you could help us fix it." I considered her offer for a long moment. Part of me wanted nothing to do with North Peak ever again. But another part saw an opportunity to actually make a difference, to prevent what happened to me from happening to someone else. "I will think about it," I said finally. "But I am not making any promises." "That is fair." News of Gerald's termination spread through industry circles within days. Unlike my story, which had been shared as inspiration, Gerald's downfall was shared as a cautionary tale. Articles appeared in business publications about the dangers of toxic management and the importance of fostering innovation. North Peak was mentioned frequently, usually as an example of what not to do. I tried not to pay attention to it, but it was hard to ignore. People kept sending me links to articles and social media posts. One particularly viral thread on Twitter documented multiple cases of talented engineers being driven out of companies by insecure managers, with my story cited as the most dramatic example. Gerald himself disappeared from public view. His LinkedIn profile went dark. He did not respond to interview requests from journalists. According to Jenna, he had hired a crisis management firm to try to rehabilitate his reputation, but it was not working. Too many former employees were coming forward with their own stories of how he had treated them. I should have felt satisfaction, but mostly I felt exhausted. The whole situation had consumed months of my life, and I was ready to move forward. I wanted to focus on my new investment fund and helping other entrepreneurs succeed. But then something unexpected happened that changed everything. I received an email from someone named Thomas, who identified himself as Gerald's nephew. The email was brief, but intriguing. Thomas wanted to meet with me to discuss something important about his uncle. He said it was not a trick or an attempt to make me feel guilty. He had information I needed to hear. Beverly advised me not to respond. It could be a setup, she warned. Gerald might be trying to gather ammunition for another legal attack. But my curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet Thomas in a public place, the same coffee shop where I had met Vivian and Patricia. I brought Beverly with me, and we arrived early to scope out the location. Thomas showed up exactly on time. He was in his mid-30s, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, and he looked nervous. He ordered coffee and sat down across from us. "Thank you for meeting with me," Thomas said. "I know this is strange." "What do you want?" Beverly asked directly. Thomas took a breath. "I want to tell you something about my uncle that might help you understand why he acted the way he did. I am not excusing his behavior. What he did to you and others was wrong. But I think you deserve to know the full story." I leaned forward slightly. "I am listening. 20 years ago, My uncle developed a revolutionary medical diagnostic tool while working at a hospital in Boston. It was brilliant, genuinely groundbreaking. He spent 2 years perfecting it, and when he finally presented it to the hospital administration, they loved it. Thomas paused, his expression pained. But then the hospital's chief of staff took the project away from him. The man claimed that since Gerald had developed it while employed by the hospital, it belonged to them. They cut Gerald out entirely, gave the project to someone else to commercialize, and that person made millions from it. Gerald got nothing, not even credit. I felt my stomach twist. So that is why he was so paranoid about innovation. He never recovered from it, Thomas said. It destroyed him professionally and personally. He became convinced that anyone with a good idea was trying to steal his thunder, that innovation was just a threat to job security. He turned into the very thing that had hurt him, someone who crushes other people's dreams. Beverly spoke up. Why are you telling us this? Because my uncle is sick, Thomas said quietly. He has pancreatic cancer. The doctors say he has maybe 6 months, and he is dying filled with bitterness and regret. He asked me to reach out to you because he wants to apologize, but he is too ashamed to do it himself. The coffee shop suddenly felt too quiet. I did not know what to say. I am not asking you to forgive him, Thomas continued. I am just passing along his message. He knows what he did was wrong. He knows he hurt a lot of people, and he is sorry. Not that it changes anything, but I thought you should know. Thomas stood up, left a business card with his contact information, and walked out. Beverly and I sat there in silence for a long moment. That does not change what he did, Beverly said finally. I know, I replied, but it explains a lot. Over the next few days, I could not stop thinking about Thomas's revelation. Gerald had been a villain in my story, the obstacle I had overcome. But he had also been a victim once, someone whose trauma had turned him into something cruel. It did not excuse his actions, but it added a layer of tragedy to the whole situation. I talked it over with Vivian, with Jenna, with my parents. Everyone had different opinions about whether I should reach out to Gerald or simply let it go. In the end, I decided to write him a letter. I did not forgive him. I did not pretend that what he did was acceptable. But I acknowledged that I understood, at least partly, where his fear came from. And I told him that I hoped he could find some peace in whatever time he had left. I mailed the letter not knowing if he would read it or how he would respond. A week later, I received a short handwritten note back. It simply said, "Thank you. I am glad you succeeded. I hope you help others do the same." That was the last communication I ever had with Gerald. 3 months after my exchange of letters with Gerald, I was sitting in my new office space in downtown Salt Lake City, reviewing applications for the Angel Investment Fund. The space was modest but bright, with large windows overlooking the city and enough room for a small team. I had hired 2 associates to help me evaluate proposals and manage the portfolio, both young professionals who reminded me of myself at their age, hungry, driven, and tired of being overlooked by traditional investors. The fund had received over 200 applications in its first quarter. Stories poured in from engineers, designers, healthcare workers, teachers, people from every industry imaginable who had developed solutions to real problems only to be dismissed by the gatekeepers in their fields. Reading their proposals was like looking into a mirror. I saw my own frustration and determination reflected in every page. One application stood out immediately. It came from a woman named Bethany who worked as a nurse in Phoenix. She had developed a patient monitoring system that could predict complications hours before they became critical, potentially saving thousands of lives. She had presented it to her hospital's administration multiple times, only to be told it was too expensive to implement, and that her job was to provide care, not innovate. I called Bethany that afternoon. She answered on the second ring, her voice cautious. "Is this really Katie?" she asked. "It is," I read your application. Your monitoring system is exactly the kind of project we want to support. Can you walk me through how it works? Bethany's caution dissolved into excitement as she explained the technical details. The system used existing patient data to identify patterns that human observers often missed. It was elegant, efficient, and could be integrated into current hospital infrastructure with minimal disruption. Why did your hospital reject this? I asked, though I already knew the answer. The director of nursing said it would make nurses less important if a computer could do part of our job. She saw it as a threat instead of a tool. I tried explaining that it would free us up to spend more time with patients, but she would not listen. Have you thought about leaving and developing this independently? Bethany laughed bitterly. On a nurse's salary? I have student loans and rent. I barely have savings. Starting a company is not something people like me get to do. What if you had funding? I asked. What if someone covered your living expenses for 6 months and gave you seed money to build a prototype? The line went quiet for a moment. Are you serious? Completely serious. Send me your technical specifications and a detailed budget. If everything checks out, we will make you an offer within 2 weeks. Bethany started crying. Thank you. You have no idea what this means. But I did know. I knew exactly what it meant. Over the next several weeks, I worked with Bethany to structure the investment and set up her company. We connected her with medical device experts who could advise on regulatory requirements. We introduced her to hospital administrators who were more forward-thinking than her current employer. We gave her everything she needed to succeed. Bethany was not the only one. By the end of the fund's first 6 months, we had invested in 12 projects. A teacher who had developed an adaptive learning platform, an environmental scientist with a breakthrough water filtration system, a mechanic who had designed a more efficient engine component. Each person had been dismissed or blocked by someone in authority who felt threatened by innovation. The work was deeply satisfying in a way that selling my own company had not been. Watching these founders overcome the same obstacles I had faced, seeing their ideas come to life, knowing that I had played a role in making it possible, that felt like the real victory. But the story was not finished. One afternoon, I received a call from a journalist named Marcus, who wrote for a national business publication. He was working on a feature about the rise of niche angel funds and wanted to profile mine. What makes your fund different? Marcus asked during our phone interview. We focus specifically on projects that have been rejected by established institutions, I explained. We believe that some of the best innovations are being killed by people who are more interested in protecting their own positions than advancing their fields. That is a pretty specific thesis. Where does it come from? I told him my story. Not just the sanitized version I had shared before, but the whole thing. The humiliation in the boardroom. Walking out with nothing. Building streamlined solutions from scratch. The viral thank you card. Gerald's downfall. And finally, learning about his own trauma and how it had shaped his behavior. Marcus was silent for a moment after I finished. That is an incredible story. Would you be willing to go on the record with all of that? I hesitated. I had been careful about how much I shared publicly, but something about this moment felt right. The fund was succeeding. The people I was helping were thriving. Maybe it was time to tell the full story. Yes, I said. I will go on the record. The article came out 6 weeks later. Marcus had done an exceptional job, weaving together my personal journey with profiles of the founders I was now supporting. The headline read, "From boardroom humiliation to $100 million exit. How one engineer is funding the next generation of rejected innovators." The article went viral immediately. It was shared across social media, picked up by other publications, and discussed on business podcasts. But unlike the first wave of attention around the thank you card, this time the focus was less on revenge and more on redemption. People were not just celebrating my success, they were inspired by what I was doing with it. Within days of the article's publication, The fund received 500 new applications. Journalists requested interviews. Conference organizers invited me to speak. Venture capital firms reached out asking how they could partner with us, but the most meaningful response came from the people I had helped. Bethany sent me a video message showing her patient monitoring system being tested at a hospital in Phoenix. The teacher I had funded had her adaptive learning platform, adopted by an entire school district. The environmental scientist was in talks with a major nonprofit about deploying her water filtration system in developing countries. These were not just business successes. They were lives being saved, children learning better, communities getting access to clean water. The ripple effects of supporting these innovations went far beyond anything I could have anticipated. 8 months after I had walked out of that boardroom at North Peak, I found myself standing on a stage at a technology conference in San Francisco. The event organizers had asked me to give a keynote address about overcoming obstacles in innovation. The auditorium was packed with over 1,000 people. I looked out at the audience and saw faces that reminded me of my younger self, ambitious, uncertain, hungry for validation. I saw people who had probably been dismissed or discouraged, people who wondered if their ideas were worth fighting for. I told them my story. I started with the moment Gerald had called my project nonsense and laughed in front of the board. I described the shame and anger I had felt, the fear of leaving without a plan, the grinding work of building something from nothing. I talked about the vindication of the acquisition and the unexpected complexity of learning about Gerald's own trauma. Revenge is satisfying, I said, but it is also hollow if that is all you achieve. The real victory is not in proving someone wrong. It is in building something meaningful that outlasts the conflict. It is in using your success to lift up other people who are in the position you once were. I talked about the investment fund and the founders we were supporting. I shared their stories, their struggles, their triumphs. The audience listened with rapt attention, and I could see some people wiping away tears. When I finished, the applause was deafening. People stood, and the ovation continued for what felt like minutes. As I walked off stage, conference attendees lined up to talk to me. They shared their own stories of being dismissed or overlooked. They asked for advice. They thanked me for giving them hope. One woman, probably in her early 40s, waited until everyone else had gone. "I work at a pharmaceutical company," she said. "I developed a drug delivery system that could reduce side effects for chemotherapy patients. My supervisor buried it because he said it would cannibalize existing products. I was about to give up, but after hearing you speak, I am going to fight for it, even if that means leaving." I gave her my business card. "Send me your proposal. Let us see if we can help." She looked at the card like it was made of gold. "Thank you. You have no idea what this means." But I did know. I knew exactly what it meant. The conference marked a turning point. After San Francisco, speaking invitations poured in from around the country. I gave talks at universities, corporate events, and startup accelerators. Each time I shared not just the story of my success, but the lessons I had learned about resilience, integrity, and using power responsibly. The investment fund grew beyond what I had imagined. We raised a second round of capital, expanded our team, and broadened our focus to include not just rejected innovators, but also underrepresented founders who struggled to access traditional funding. Within a year, our portfolio included 35 companies across 15 industries. But the most satisfying moment came from an unexpected source. I received an email from Patricia at North Peak. She had stepped down as Chief Financial Officer to become the company's Chief Innovation Officer, a newly created position focused on rebuilding the culture I had once fled. Patricia wrote that North Peak had implemented several initiatives inspired by my story. They had created an innovation council where any employee could present ideas directly to leadership. They had established protected time for employees to work on side projects. They had hired external evaluators to assess proposals objectively rather than relying solely on departmental managers. "We cannot undo the past," Patricia wrote, but we are trying to ensure it does not repeat. I wanted you to know that your experience, as painful as it was, has created meaningful change here. I hope that brings you some measure of peace." I did find peace in that, though not in the way she probably expected. The peace came from knowing that something good had emerged from something terrible. That my story had not just been about personal vindication, but had actually improved conditions for other people. I thought about Gerald sometimes, though less as time passed. I had learned through Thomas that he had died 6 months after our exchange of letters. According to Thomas, Gerald had spent his final weeks trying to make amends with people he had hurt. He had written apology letters, made phone calls, and even established a small scholarship fund for aspiring engineers who could not afford college. It was not enough to erase what he had done, but it was something, a recognition of harm, an attempt at repair, more than many people in his position ever managed. One evening, almost a year after everything had started, I sat in my office reviewing the quarter's results. The fund had performed beyond projections. 3 of our portfolio companies had been acquired by larger firms. 5 others had reached profitability. 2 were on track for initial public offerings within the next 18 months. But the numbers that mattered most were different. Bethany's patient monitoring system had been deployed in 20 hospitals and had already detected early warning signs that saved 43 lives. The adaptive learning platform had improved test scores for over 5,000 students. The water filtration system was providing clean drinking water to 3 villages in East Africa. These were the real measures of success. Not the money, though that mattered too. Not the recognition, though that had its place. The real success was in the lives being improved, the problems being solved, the potential being unleashed. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Remember Claire, that woman from Denver you helped with her inventory system? Her company just got acquired. She wanted me to tell you thanks." I smiled. Claire had been one of the first people I had helped after starting the fund. Seeing her succeed felt like closing a circle. I thought back to that moment in the boardroom when Gerald had called my project nonsense. I thought about how small I had felt, how certain I had been that my career was over. If someone had told me then what the next year would bring, I never would have believed them. The 2nd anniversary of leaving North Peak arrived on a Tuesday morning in April. I woke up early, went for a run through the foothills overlooking Salt Lake City, and arrived at the office feeling energized. My team had planned a small celebration. Nothing elaborate, just cake and a chance to reflect on how far we had come. But before the celebration, I had one meeting scheduled. A young man named Jordan had flown in from Seattle to pitch his project. He was 24, fresh out of college, and working as a junior engineer at an aerospace company. He had developed a new approach to satellite propulsion that could reduce costs by 40%, but his managers had dismissed it as too risky. Jordan sat across from me in the conference room, his presentation pulled up on his laptop. He looked nervous, the way I had probably looked before that disastrous board meeting 2 years ago. "Before you start," I said, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens in this meeting, your idea has value. Whether we fund it or not, whether it succeeds or not, the fact that you developed it and had the courage to pursue it matters. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise." Jordan's shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you. That helps." His presentation was brilliant, technical, detailed, and backed by solid research. He had clearly spent months developing the concept and running simulations. As he spoke, I could see the passion and intelligence that had gone into the work. When he finished, I did not make him wait. "We are going to fund this," I said. "Let us talk about next steps." Jordan looked stunned. "Really? That is it? You do not need to review it with your team or run more analysis?" "I trust my instincts," I said. "And I trust that someone talented enough to develop this system is talented enough to build a company around it. We will do proper due diligence, of course, but I am confident this is exactly the kind of project we want to support." After Jordan left, practically floating out of the office, my team gathered for the anniversary celebration. We cut the cake, shared stories about our favorite portfolio companies, and talked about plans for the year ahead. One of my associates, a sharp woman named Kira, raised her glass. To Katie, who turned rejection into revolution. Everyone laughed and clinked glasses, but I shook my head. It was not a revolution. It was just refusing to accept someone else's limitations. And it was not just me. It was every person who took a chance when the safe path was giving up. That is what we celebrate today. As the celebration wound down, I returned to my office and found an envelope on my desk. It was hand-delivered, according to the note from reception. Inside was a letter with no return address. I opened it carefully. The handwriting was shaky but legible. Dear Katie, you do not know me, but I worked with your Uncle Gerald for 8 years. I want you to know that before he died, he talked about you often. He said you had done what he could not, turned being wronged into something constructive instead of destructive. He was proud of you, though he knew he had no right to be. I thought you should know that. Sincerely, a former colleague. I read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I was not sure how I felt about it. Proud, maybe. Sad, definitely. But also grateful, in a strange way, that even Gerald had found some measure of redemption before the end. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Douglas at Velthorn. Just saw your name on the list of speakers for the Global Innovation Summit. Proud to see how far you have come. The efficiency system you built is now being used by over 200 companies worldwide. You changed the industry. I typed back a quick thank you, then looked around my office. The walls were covered with photos of the founders we had funded, their faces bright with hope and determination. A corkboard held thank you notes, news articles about successful exits, and printouts of lives saved or improved by the innovations we had supported. This was what success looked like. Not a viral meme or a dramatic confrontation, though those had their place in the story. Real success was measured in opportunities created, in potential unlocked, in systems changed for the better. I thought about the advice I would give my younger self, if I could go back to that moment in the boardroom. I would tell her that Gerald's laughter did not define her worth, that walking away was not failure, but the first step toward something better, that the pain of rejection would fuel not just revenge, but purpose. I would tell her that 8 months later, everything would be different. Not perfect, not without complications, but profoundly better. That she would build not just one successful company, but an entire ecosystem of innovation. That she would help dozens of people achieve their own versions of what she had accomplished. And I would tell her that the thank you card, that simple, petty gesture of triumph, would end up meaning less than the thousands of thank yous that would come later from people whose lives she had helped change. Gerald never recovered from his disgrace at North Peak. After his termination, he struggled to find work in the industry. Companies had read the articles, seen the social media posts, and heard the stories from former employees. His reputation was destroyed beyond repair. He spent his remaining months trying to make amends, writing apology letters, and reaching out to people he had hurt. Some accepted his apologies, others did not. When he died, his obituary mentioned his early career achievements, but conspicuously avoided discussing his later years. The consulting firm he had hired to rehabilitate his image quietly closed his file. In the end, Gerald's legacy was not the decades he spent in management, but the cautionary tale he became about the cost of crushing innovation to protect ego. As for me, I continued building something that mattered. The investment fund grew into one of the most successful early-stage funds in the country, known for taking chances on unconventional founders with unconventional ideas. Looking back at my revenge journey, I realized that the sweetest part was not watching Gerald fall, but watching other people rise. People who might have given up if they had not seen someone like them succeed against the odds. That was the real victory, and it kept paying dividends long after the satisfaction of that viral thank you card had faded.